Hello everyone and welcome to another most impressive game from round 7 of this year's FIDE Chess Olympiad. It is the match Austria versus Norway, and on board 1 we have Valentin Dragnev versus Magnus Carlsen. Now there is quite a bit of a rating difference, almost 300 rating points, but both of them are undefeated so far in the tournament, and you could say that Valentin had a tougher opposition than Magnus so far. As he drew Salim Saleh, he drew Richard Rapport, and he drew young Krzysztof Duda in that incredible game where he sacrificed his queen. So he's doing incredibly well, but like I said, so is everyone else until they face Magnus Carlsen. So can he hold off well, possibly the greatest chess player who ever lived? Let's check it out. Valentin with white opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to d6. Magnus goes for the Pirc defense. We have pawn to d4, knight to f6, and knight to c3. Magnus starts with strikes with pawn to e5, knight f3, and knight b to d7, the so-called lion variation of the Pirc. We have bishop to c4 and bishop to e7. I'm not really an expert on the Pirc, so I don't know if this is actually the lion or they just call it the lion nowadays because it is a very old opening. So could be anything. We have castles, and again, a very well-known position. Some go rook e1, some go h3, some go a4 right away. I myself prefer pawn to a4. This is also what Valentin plays. Pawn to c6, and now pawn to h3. Pawn to h6, bishop to e3, and rook to e8. And there are a couple of games that reach this position. Standard moves apply here, like rook d1, d captures on e5. You can go queen to d2. You can also advance the pawn to d5, or you could play pawn to a5. But interestingly, pawn to a5 has never been played before, and it is now as of move 10 that we have a completely new game. So okay, Magnus captures on d4 as one usually does. We have queen captures. You could also capture with the bishop and with the knight. Valentin decides to capture with the queen. The queen is on a very active square. Since the pawn is on c6, you don't have knight to c6 to kick away the queen right away. Bishop to f8, and now rook f to e1. We have queen to c7 and bishop to f4, x-raying Magnus's queen on c7. We have knight to e5 and bishop back to e2. The bishop is attacked, so Valentin for the moment preserves the bishop pair. Bishop to d7 and bishop to g3. Valentin hinting at the possibility of maybe going knight to d2 and striking with pawn to f4 to kick away the knight from such an active square. Pawn to a6, and now bishop to h4, with the idea of maybe bishop captures on f6 if Magnus allows it, and Magnus goes rook to e6, and now knight captures on e5. Again, knight to d2 definitely a possibility, followed by pawn to f4. He decides to trade, knight captures on e5. We have rook captures on e5, allowing bishop captures on f6, and well, depending on what kind of a game do you want to play, you could capture, or you could try something else. Again, pawn to e4 is an idea if you prepare it for something like pawn to b4 has to be played because your a5 pawn is hanging, but then f4 will be an idea. But he goes for b4 instead of bishop captures on f6. He says, I'm not interested in ruining your king side. You're Magnus Carlsen. I'm pretty sure you can defend that. I would prefer to keep my bishop pair. And now Magnus plays rook 8 to e8, again inviting bishop captures on f6, which now definitely can be played. Like if bishop captures, pawn captures, you strike with pawn to f4, like rook comes to e7, rook 8 to d1. Everything is fine here. The d6 pawn is hanging. Magnus will play some like pawn to d5, and the game continues. But after rook 8 to e8, Valentin played bishop to g3, and now the situation on the clock is pretty much equal. Magnus a little bit better on time. Feel free to pause the video and figure out what Magnus played here and what little intricacy Valentin missed while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this tricky maneuver, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to c5, a very nasty move to miss. And the point is, if you capture, then rook captures, the rook moves itself out of harm's way, and the knight is attacked. You cannot really defend the knight, and you have to move away the knight. I mean, you can defend with something like rook a3, but then the a5 pawn falls. If you move the knight, then again the a5 pawn falls, so the a5 pawn falls either way, and if you move the knight, knight to, let's say, d5, then Magnus can even trade on d5 and then capture the pawn on c2. So you would lose material either way here. So Valentin instead plays queen back to d1, Magnus plays c captures on b4, adamant about sacrificing the exchange, and now there doesn't seem to be anything better than bishop captures on e5, which is what Valentin plays. Bishop captures, d captures, the knight still hanging, knight to d5, we have knight captures, e captures, and now pawn to e4, really limiting the mobility of Valentin's pieces, especially taking away the d3 square from the queen and the bishop. Bishop to g4, offering a trade of bishops, and pawn to f5, really making that pawn on e4 a solid pawn. Bishop to h5, attacking Magnus's other rook, and this one Magnus decides to keep. We have rook c8, putting pressure on the c2 pawn, and pawn to d6, inviting the queen to capture on c2, but if queen captures on c2 right away, then queen to d5 check will pick up the b7 pawn. So Magnus decides to play queen to c5, and now we have pawn to c3. Again, doesn't seem that there's something better that Valentin can do, and of course if queen captures, you will again give this queen d5 check and pick up the b7 pawn. But if pawn captures on c3, then queen to b3 check will again pick up the b7 pawn. So it's not a pawn sacrifice, it's an offer to a pawn trade. Magnus decides to capture because this gives him a pass pawn on c3. Queen to b3 with check, we have queen to c4, and queen captures on b7, making bishop to c6 impossible, as the rook here would hang, but there is queen to e6, and now everything is nicely defended. Even bishop to c6 becomes a possibility, and you will just pick up that d6 pawn. So Valentin cannot keep his passed pawn, and we have queen captures on a6. Here, maybe it's still possible to defend, but you have to find rook to e4. It's such an ugly move to make, but you are up in exchange, so you could give it up. And then if queen captures, you pick up the bishop here, and of course if the pawn captures, you play bishop g4, and then you pick up the bishop, like queen captures on d7, and you trade everything off into a rook and opposite color bishop endgame, something like bishop to a4, and okay, Magnus would be up a pawn, but bishops of opposite color. Probably Magnus still finds a way to win, as he usually does, but this was the best way for Valentin to hold the game. He played queen captures on a6, and now bishop captures on d6. We have queen to a7 because the threat is now bishop to h2 check, just picking up the queen on a6, queen to a7, and pawn to c2. The pawn is now extremely strong. Pawn to a6, Valentin also tries to bring his pawn up the board. We have bishop to f4 guarding the queening square, and now queen to b7. And there is only one move that wins the game for Magnus, but I'm pretty sure all of you see it. Just in case, have at it. Of course, you guys found it, as you are amazing chess players, but just in case, it is rook to b8. That is the move, and the rook is now coming to b1. This cannot be defended, and if pawn to a7, which, okay, you can play, and you will get a queen into the game, but you just traded a queen for a queen, so basically you're just down a pawn, rook to b8, and there's nothing there. So instead, we have queen to a7, and now queen to d6. This is a very, very tricky move by Magnus, not rushing it or anything. It's probably prevents ideas like pawn to g3, and this is now a problem because after bishop to d2 attacking the rook and rook e2, now rook to b1 really gets it ends the game. Nothing more to be done here. So after queen to d6, we have bishop to e2, just getting the bishop back into the game, and now we have bishop to e6. We have bishop to f1 and king to h7, so improving the position as much as possible. Plus also you are getting very low on time, you need to make 4 more moves until time control. Rook e to c1, Valentin also below the 1 minute mark. We have bishop captures on c1, rook captures on c1, and now rook to b1, and there is nothing more that you can do here. It's I think it even ended around this point. Let me just check real quickly. I don't want to trick you guys. I'm not really sure where it ended. Okay, so it actually ended on move 40. Yeah, so yeah, after rook b1, queen to e3 was played, defending the rook, and now Magnus just played queen to d1. Now pawn to a7, because if queen captures, nothing really happens. You just bring the queen into the game, and the queen captures, and f1 will end the game. So pawn to a7, and here just queen captures on c1, and he was in this position on move 40 that Valentin Dragnev resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So it's his first loss of the Olympiad, but it does come at the hand of one Magnus Carlsen. And the point is that now, if you capture, let's say queen captures on c1 and rook captures, yes, you can get a queen into the game, but here comes the very unpleasant rook captures on c1 with check, and after king captures, c1 check, c1 queen check, only move king to e2, and bishop to c4 will be checkmate. So there is nothing even to try here. It's just a forced checkmate in a couple of moves. So yeah, very nicely done by both of them, but it is Magnus who wins this one. And yeah, he just pulls off, a Philidor out of nowhere, goes for this alliance setup, and outplays his opponent, who, like I said, is almost 300 rating points lower rated, but is playing an incredible tournament. No one can touch him. He, completely outplayed the young Krzysztof Duda in that crazy position. So we are expecting a lot from Valentin in the, days, months, and years to come after showing such skill. And yeah, in the following round, Gukesh will face Parham, and the Magnus will face Quang Liam Le, who is also undefeated. So we'll see if he can touch Magnus. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank John Anderson, Anthony, Littleman, an anonymous person, and well, he who we shall not name, for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, but mostly covering the Olympiad. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.